Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. Today we have another book review for you. This is for What Stalks the Deep from Kingfisher. This is the third novella in the Sworn Soldier series. This released on September 30th, and the hardback novella, which is the one that I have got, comes in at 192 pages long. We shall start by talking about the story before moving on to the characters, world building, presentation, and my final thoughts at the end. So let's dive straight in. So the story then, this picks up a period of time after the previous book. In this case, Alex and Angus, his friend and travelling companion, have received a telegram from Dr. Denton. We meet Dr. Denton within book one of this series, and basically because they have a shared history with unusual happenings from the ground, Dr. Denton reaches out to help with something. Now, this, unfortunately, for Alex's point of view, means he's got to travel to the United States of America to help with this investigation. And upon arrival, he discovers that Denton's cousin Oscar has gone missing, specifically within a coal mine in Appalachia. And it kicks off from there with a series of investigations, both of the cave itself, local communities, and the local town as well as digging into some local folklore and some unusual happenings and sightings that potentially do date back a long, long time. This works really, really well as a mystery. It is also once again nice to be reunited with characters from the earlier books. And you do have a lot of mystery going on here. I think it is fair to say that out of the three books in the series so far, this one kind of feels the most horror light but mystery heavy, as we have no idea what we're looking at here. And there's a number of false leads as to what's actually going on. So overall, this works as a good central mystery rather than a horror, but tonally that fits better with the book, which we'll get into a little bit later on. In terms of characters then, and it's really interesting looking at Alex Easton as a character in this book, when in comparison to where the characters started in What Moves the Dead. And I can't really talk too much about the character without talking about the tonality of the book. This is perhaps the most light-hearted of the books. We have a lot more internal monologue that feels almost humorous at times and very, very light-hearted, which if you told me this was where the book was going after book one had finished, or the series was going, I should say, I would be slightly surprised. A good example of this is quite early on when everything has been described to them. And a direct quote from the book: "That is very horrifying, and I want to go home," I said, although I pronounced it, I see. And that kind of shows a bit of a disconnect between the mentality of the character and almost like a social obligation to their friend. And that's what drives Alex Easton as a character here. Their need to help their friend and overcoming their own fears. And there's a number of fears here that are sort of looked at, especially claustrophobia in this underground mine, which may or may not be stable, which may have had a history of collapse as well as being in a country that really they don't really want to be in. And it's really interesting seeing that sort of internal war of what they personally want to do, but they feel their need to back up their friend. And it's a really interesting sort of arc over the three books that gets us to this point. Of course, on top of all this, we do have the other characters we meet in here. Angus is, as always, the most practical of the group, being a former soldier that just is very, very rooted in routine and just getting things done, and is quite often the voice of reason, which again makes sense over the course of the books. Denton as well is incredibly concerned about their cousin who has gone missing, and we get some revelations in terms of their relationship status and how taboo that may or may not be. And it all just works really, really well to give this a more wholesome feel as a book. Is there a huge amount of character development in here? Not really. I think if you look at this over the course of the three books, it actually forms a better arc in terms of Alex kind of becoming a more light-hearted person and moving further and further away from the various grief and grievances that they've had in their life beforehand. But certainly, this is actually at times just a funny book to read because of that internal monologue, which fits the tone of this really, really well. A lot of the world building for this is environmental. It leans on the natural mystique of Appalachia itself, a place that in real life is a hotbed for folklore, tales, and cryptid sightings. And it leans into that sort of mysterious allure of the area. First of all, with its natural sort of descriptions of the area, but also have these little tidbits as we travel through, as we meet the local communities. And these little rumours and sightings and weird animal attacks, which are often a staple to folktales and rumour that you hear coming out of Appalachia. And also, we get a look at the mining systems and how important mining was to the local economy, but also how dangerous it could be, how these cave-ins could literally decimate lives, and how unwilling some places were to close down mines even if they were unsafe, but also what happens when those mines do shut down and just sort of mild collapse of the areas around. It also builds really well on the sense of almost not quite isolation, but everywhere is just a little bit too far away to be helpful when things go wrong. And then, of course, you have the cave system itself, the claustrophobic feel, the description of all the different types of damp, inverted commas, like fire damp, and different ways that they can kill you and how you can or sometimes cannot spot them. And that actually plays into the story at certain points as well, as certain environmental hazards play into the sense of tension and help to prolong the mystery. This isn't a straight case of walk into cave, find the answer. The environment really does play a massive role here. And it's in many ways sort of the central character, kind of. The actual cave system itself feels threatening, oppressive, dangerous, as somewhere that people probably shouldn't be with it in this condition, which really does lead into the sense of tension and mystery of the story here. So first off, let's talk about the cover. I once again do absolutely love the covers for these books. I do prefer the UK covers. If you want to see the US covers, if you go on to Goodreads, the US covers tend to come up first. But I do once again prefer the UK cover, although it is a lot closer this time. The US cover is pretty good as well. Also does a good job of explaining something to do with the investigations, although I'm not going to go into any further detail with that without spoiling something. But in terms of the writing, Kingfisher's writing is once again stellar. And Kingfisher does an amazing job of juggling a number of different things, be it the horror of the situation, the claustrophobia that they go through, the tension for not knowing what's happened, to the actual physical threat at times. But not just that, you have human moments, you have relationships being developed here, you have really good use and approach to pronoun usage as well, which has been consistent throughout the books. And, you know, these human moments really do well to balance out the sort of more alien nature of Appalachia as a whole, and this cave system and this thing that they're looking for, which they don't know what it is. Also, as mentioned previously, this feels like the most light-hearted book in the series in many ways. Alex as a character at this point feels a lot more at peace with themselves, and the internal monologue is literally funny at times. It made me actually laugh, which not many books manage to do, and those moments of humour do act as a really good pressure release on the moments of tension that come before, but also tonally act as such an opposite to the more gruesome moments that are in here. And there is a couple in here that it actually elevates how gruesome those moments feel. Now, it is worth mentioning that this is nowhere near as gruesome in its physical horror as books 1 or 2 in the series. Book 1 in particular, I've not read many books that hit quite the same level as that one does without venturing into extreme horror. But they're very, very effective in here as well. And the double twist that's in this is really, really well executed. So once again, I mean, I've never been disappointed with the writing and presentation of a Kingfisher book. And this is another great example of a book that doesn't waste any of its time going into fluff or padding and manages its flow and pacing and all the different tonalities really, really well. Final thoughts then. This is an easy 4-star recommend for me personally. I think out of the 3 books in the series, this is the most fun to read. This is not necessarily the most light-hearted, but it's kind of the most wholesome as well. Now, I will say, if you really like how book 1 was tonally, you might find this one a little bit jarring. I will also say, however, that in terms of tone, this flows really well from the second book into the series, in a way that the second book didn't really quite flow for me from the first, as we follow Alex's whole sort of character arc over the 3 books. But this was a lot of fun to read. It had a few gruesome moments, but not as many as the previous books. It was genuinely funny in places, and it was a really, really smart mystery with a clever reveal, which I appreciate as well. So that's my thoughts on What Stalks the Dead by T. Kingfisher, the 3rd book in the Swan Soldier series. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please consider giving it a like down below and subscribing to the channel if you've not already. But with that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you all very soon.